Okay, we can go ahead and get started. So welcome, my name is Kevin Saracino. I am a member of AmeriCorps. I'm currently serving with Chagrin River Watershed Partners. And welcome to this presentation. It's called Rain Gardens 101. We're gonna get into basics of rain gardens, what they are, how they work. And it will be presented by Laura Bonnell, who is also with Chagrin River Watershed Partners. She's a project manager, and she also runs the CRWP section of the Master Rain Gardener program. And with that, that's all I have. I'm going to turn it over to Laura and she can go ahead and get started. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here with us today to talk about all things rain gardens. As Kevin mentioned, I'm Laura Bonnell, and I'm a project manager with Chagrin River Watershed Partners, and I implement and I help teach the Master Rain Gardener program in Northeast Ohio, along with Lake and Cuyahoga County Soil and Water Conservation Districts. So today we're going to cram that 5-week course into an hour long, and we're going to give you an introduction to rain gardens. We're going to talk about what is a rain garden, why you might want a rain garden in your yard, and also how to actually plan and install your rain garden. So we're going to go everything from determining how big your rain garden should be, how deep it should be, how you're going to dig your rain garden, how to design the planting and choose what the plants are you're going to put in your rain garden, and then any maintenance that's required. The nice thing about rain gardens, if you do them right, they really are they require a minimal amount of maintenance. So let's get started. So what is a rain garden? Well, a rain garden, as you can see from this diagram, is a garden in a depressed location in your yard that's designed and located to receive stormwater runoff from impervious surfaces. An impervious surface can be anything that's really not absorbing water into the ground. So it could be your roof, your driveway, sidewalks. Even turf grass is really rather impervious because of its short root system. So the rain gardens are designed to capture that stormwater runoff and allow it to filter and infiltrate into the ground. Rain gardens do best when they're filled with native, wet-tolerant plants, but also plants that don't mind it droughty times and to be a little bit dry. So that's a brief, quick overview of what a rain garden is. Now let's talk about why you might want a rain garden in your yard. So to understand the benefits of rain gardens, first we need to talk about stormwater runoff and those impacts from stormwater runoff. So stormwater runoff is basically any water from a rain, melted snow, even water that you use to wash your car with that runs off these impervious surfaces, like a driveway, sidewalk, roof, whatever, and then it flows over those impervious surfaces, does not absorb into the ground, and it's taken into the stormwater sewer system, as you can see from this diagram on the right. So all that water flows over those impervious surfaces and goes directly into our local streams and eventually Lake Erie, depending on what watershed you're in. But you're probably thinking it's just water, so what's the big deal? Well, when that stormwater runoff travels over those impervious surfaces, it's picking up a ton of pollutants and debris as it goes. So as you can see from these pictures, like near that garbage can, you see some sediment there, and then on that sidewalk picture, there's yard debris and maybe some pet waste. And then even worse, in that last picture on the right, you see the residue from gas and oil from cars. So all that is getting picked up by that rainwater or any sort of stormwater and taking right into that storm sewer system and being transported right into our streams and ultimately Lake Erie completely untreated. And also, this is only what you can see with your naked eye. There's also other things like pesticides, fertilizers, any like household chemicals that also are picked up by stormwater and taken in the streams. So it's more than just water. And in addition to all the pollution that stormwater runoff can send to our streams, it also can create erosion and flooding during those like really high rain events. That stormwater is just shot right into those streams and can create severe erosion and local flooding, like as you see in these impervious surfaces. That water is not being absorbed into the ground. So that is the negative impacts of stormwater runoff. And then as you can see here in this video, to make it a little more visual, this is a video of the Puget Sound underwater. And you can see the stormwater runoff being released into the Puget Sound. And you can see how dirty that stormwater runoff is. So you can really see it's picking up a ton of pollutants and then all that other stuff you can't see. And that's just being pushed right into our local waterways completely untreated. So it's so bad. The Environmental Protection Agency classifies unmanaged stormwater runoff as the leading threat to the quality of our U.S. surface waters. And so another visual picture for you here, you can see this is an aerial view of the Great Lakes, and in Lake Erie and the Western Basin, all that green, those are the harmful algal blooms that you may have heard of. And that's also caused from runoff. This particular runoff usually comes from phosphorus being runoff from farmlands and sewage treatment plants. So you can really see how harmful stormwater runoff can be when it's unmanaged and untreated. So as you can imagine, developed areas like urban areas have more impervious surfaces than it would in like natural areas. So that means an increased amount of stormwater runoff, which means more negative impacts to our streams and surrounding habitat. And this is like in adverse to natural landscapes where there's forested cover and all these plants. These naturally filter out the pollutants and naturally allow water to slow down and be soaked into the ground. So it's reducing flooding, reducing erosion, and also providing wonderful habitats. So you can see how stormwater runoff in urban areas is going untreated into our sewer systems, where as it falls in a natural landscape as it's supposed to, it's infiltrating into the ground and treating that water at its source. So this basically brings us to gray infrastructure versus green infrastructure. So in a built environment, the way it's designed is to move that stormwater runoff away from our buildings and houses and communities as fast as possible, you know, to protect our buildings and, you know, to prevent flooding and to protect us as a community. And that's just taken right to our streams. But green infrastructure works with nature and treats that stormwater right at its source. So it doesn't send it off as quickly as possible. It's designed to capture that stormwater runoff, allow it to soak in and be treated right there, and allow those biogeochemical processes to work as meant to be in nature. So some types of green infrastructure include green roofs, disconnecting your downspout, rain barrels, and of course, rain gardens, which is what we are talking about today. So the benefits of the rain garden, as you might have imagined, they can reduce local flooding, whether it's flooding to a stream by preventing a ton of stormwater from being taken to that stream so quickly, or reducing local flooding in your yard. If you have ponding in your yard, rain gardens do a great job to mitigate ponding, or even if it's your basement's being flooded, this can help mitigate that as well. Additionally, rain gardens can reduce the burden on sewer systems, and as you know now, filter pollutants out of that stormwater runoff. And also they create really great pollinator habitat. As we mentioned, native plants are really preferred to be put in rain gardens, and the birds and bees and bugs really love and rely on those native plants. So by planting a rain garden, you're also creating a wonderful habitat for those local critters. And then also it's just beautiful. So as opposed to just putting in another drain or a French drain, you can have this beautiful lush garden. So there's lots of benefits with rain gardens. Okay, so that's a quick overview on what a rain garden is and why you might want a rain garden in your yard. And now we're going to get into the mechanics of actually building a rain garden. If anybody has any questions about stormwater or just what a rain garden is, feel free to chat them, and Kevin will ask that question to me. So ask your questions whenever. But now I'm going to get into how to build and plan for your rain garden. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is choose your site for a rain garden. And there's lots of things to consider when choosing where to build your rain garden. You want to think about your water source. Where is that water coming from? You want to remember water goes downhill. I know it seems obvious and silly, but we have to say it because sometimes you just got to think that way when planning. You want to think about your space. Do you have enough space for a rain garden? You want to think about your sunlight conditions, whether it's sunny or shady. Some people think you can't have a shady rain garden, but that's definitely not true. You can definitely have a shade rain garden. You just have to take a little more time picking plants that will do well in those shady conditions. And then finally, and most important, is considering any obstacles or hazards around. The last thing you want to do by building a rain garden is create more harm. So you want to think about that when choosing your site. Okay, so let's start with water source. You have a question, Kevin?
Question. Sure. What is a French drain?
Oh, a French drain is an underground water system. It's sort of engineered to take any extra water, and it's hidden a little bit, so you can't really see it, but it just lets water travel to a certain place, and it allows it to infiltrate into the ground a little bit more. And sometimes it's directed to a storm sewer as well. So I hope that I'm not an expert on French drains, but they are helpful if you have localized flooding in your yard. Okay, so planning water source. So first you need to think about where you're going to get your water from. And as I mentioned before, it's usually from an impervious surface. This can be from your roof downspout, sidewalks, driveways, streets. And as I mentioned, even your turf grass is very impervious, so you can even direct runoff from there into your rain garden. As you see from this picture, their rain garden wants to be, they want to put it in this front yard area. And so with the slopes, you can sort of see they'd be capturing runoff from both their driveway, sidewalk, and their roof. So this is a really great location from a rain garden because it's going to capture a ton of runoff from these impervious surfaces. Okay, and as I mentioned, water goes downhill. So rain gardens should be placed downhill of your water source. If you have ponding water somewhere, you can actually put a rain garden where you have ponding water, even if it's not downhill. You don't have to put it uphill of that ponding water spot, as some people may think. But as you can see in this picture, the downspout in this top right picture, that's your water source, and it is uphill of the rain garden. So that's being, traveled into that rain garden. Now in this picture in the bottom left-hand corner, they wanted to put a rain garden in that grassy area near that little playground right there. But unfortunately, the way the slopes are, the water from the driveway is not traveling that way. As you can see, that's uphill. So they're not really able to capture the stormwater runoff from that driveway in this area. So really a rain garden here wouldn't do so much good. It definitely won't capture the runoff from the driveway. So that's why you want to think about rain gardens should be downhill, or water goes downhill.
I have another quick question, Laura. This says, I live in a flat area and many people ask me if a rain garden is useful or works in flat areas.
Yes, definitely. It depends like where you want, like what kind of runoff you're capturing. If your flat area is just ponding water, like when you have heavy rains, you can just put your rain garden right where that water is ponding, and that should work well. If you're trying to capture water from an impervious source and get it to that area and you have a flat space, you just want to make sure we'll talk about water conveyance in a minute. It's an element of a rain garden. And you just want to make sure that you can get that water to the rain garden. So in flat areas, it might require a little bit more digging if you're trying to get water from a roof to it or a driveway or something, but it's definitely possible.
Okay, great. We have one more question.
Okay.
How does permitting work with rain gardens? Do you need a permit to build rain gardens in general? Is it different by community?
Yes, it definitely varies by community. Generally, you do not need a permit, but there are some communities, I believe, like South Euclid, that you do need a permit. So I would always check your community codes and ordinances to check to see whether you do need a permit, but it's really rather rare in Northeast Ohio, at least, to need a permit to install a rain garden. If you're thinking of installing a rain garden on your tree lawn or devil's strip, which is, I guess, another name for it, that's something you definitely want to check with your community about before doing. So be safe than sorry, double check your codes and ordinances. Okay, so next thing you want to think about when choosing the location for your rain garden is space. Do you have enough space? The one hard and fast rule that we like to tell people is definitely you should keep your rain garden a minimum of 10 feet away from your foundation. If you're on a slab or you're doing it near a garage on a slab, you can get a little closer, maybe 5 feet away. But what you don't want to do is attract more water near your house. You don't want to, so being 10 feet away keeps you safe, so you can ensure you're not bringing more water towards your basement. You don't want to create more problems, as we always said. So in this picture here in the top right, they really wanted to put a rain garden to capture the runoff from all those impervious surfaces from those apartment buildings. But as you can see, they definitely do not have 10 feet of space there. So this is not a good location for a rain garden at all. So they have to either figure out a way to get the water somewhere else or just not plant a rain garden. And another thing you want to think about is sunlight, as I mentioned. Do you have a full sunspot, part sun, shade? And that'll just determine your planting choices. So for instance, asters really like full sun, while a plant like jewelweed likes more shady areas. So when you have a plant list in your handouts, which tells you a couple good shade plants and sunny plants. So that's a good place to refer to, but there's also numerous sources where you can find a whole list of rain garden plants, and you can filter it out by sun and shade. So, And then finally, obstacles and hazards. This is something you also want to think about when choosing your location. You really want to stay away from tree roots. You don't want to damage the roots of trees. And also it's super hard to dig around tree roots. So for instance, these people in the top right picture, they wanted to put a rain garden right here, but that's right under the tree canopy. There's gonna be a ton of roots there. And so we like to recommend to put your rain garden outside the drip line or the canopy of a tree. So a better location might be somewhere over here. You want to avoid those obstacles. You don't want to hurt your tree, and you don't want to have a hard time digging the rain garden. Other things to think about are septic fields. You don't want to place a rain garden on a septic field, 2 steep slopes, and then underground utilities is a huge thing. You definitely do not want to hit a gas line when digging your rain garden. So we always, always, always recommend calling OOPS before you dig. Kevin, you have a question?
Yes, we do. We have a few quick questions. First, can vegetables be planted in a rain garden?
Yes, definitely. They can be planted in a rain garden, but you have to keep in mind that you are attracting stormwater runoff, which can carry some pollutants. So if you plan on eating those vegetables, you might want to do a water quality test first, and I think you want irrigation quality water, but you want to think about that. So, but yes, it's definitely possible.
Okay, one more question. Can you use brick or any other type of edging on a rain garden, or does that impede the flow of water?
You can. We're going to talk about elements of a rain garden in a minute. So if you are doing some type of edging or wall, you'll want to probably have it down slope on the berm portion. This will make a little more sense coming up. And so maybe I can address that question in a little bit, but yes, you can. And if so, but you want to make sure water can come in. So it might not be all the way around unless you're directing your water in with a pipe underneath. So, so yeah, it's possible. You just want to make sure you design it correctly so you have the water coming in. And once we talk about elements of a rain garden, this might make a little more sense. So we'll get to that later. So if you still have a question, whoever had the brick wall question, feel free to chime in once I start talking about berms so I don't answer your question completely. So the next thing you're going to want to think about when planning your rain garden is how big or small it should be. So for anybody who doesn't like math, don't worry, don't let this intimidate you. This is for the people who really want to do the rain garden exactly right. But if you don't like math, don't worry too much right now. So you want to calculate your drainage area. Your drainage area consists of that impervious surface of the water you're going to be sending to your rain garden. So in this picture here, it's this portion of the roof. Usually roofs are sectioned off to different downspouts. So they're using this downspout, and this downspout is capturing the water from that section of the roof. So you want to take the area of that roof. Now you don't have to get up on your roof with a tape measure and find the area. There's lots of ways you can do it. Find the area. You can use, if you're in Cuyahoga County, you can use Cuyahoga County My Place. You can also just use Google Maps as long as you don't have a ton of trees covering your house and just measure it that way. Or another way is just to measure the whole perimeter of the house and then divide it by the amount of downspouts you had. So basically, whatever method you want to do to get the area of your drainage area, go for it. And so you take that, so in this case, it's 50 feet by 15 feet, which equals 750 square feet. So that's the drainage area. And you want to remember this number. We're going to come back to it to figure out the size of your rain garden. But first, if you are planning to put your rain garden further out away from that roof, like over 30 feet, you're going to want to calculate your lawn area too, because as I mentioned, that's rather impervious as well. So you want to take into account all the water running off of that spot. So you'll want to calculate that area if that's the case. Okay, so remember that 750 square feet number for your drainage area. But also to determine your size, you need to figure out what type of soils you have. Do you have well-draining soils? Do you have poorly draining soils? Northeast Ohio, Cleveland area, it's very clayey, so you might have really poor draining soils. In order to figure that out, you do a percolation test. So a percolation test is pretty easy. It's basically digging a 6-inch wide hole, 18 inches deep. You fill that hole up with water, you let it drain, and then you fill it up again. Then you get out your stopwatch and you see, well, maybe not your stopwatch, you can just look at what time it is. You see how long that water takes to soak into the ground. Let's see, so if your percolation rate is less than 24 hours, yay, you have well-draining soils. So in this case, your rain garden should be 20% of that drainage area and can be up to 4 to 6 inches deep, your ponding depth, which we'll talk about in a minute. But if you have poor draining soils, like a lot of us in Northeast Ohio, then and your drainage rate is more than 24 hours, you're going to want to make your rain garden a little bit bigger at 30% of the drainage area. And then you only want to make it 3 inches deep. This allows water to not sit too long and make sure your plants won't drown. So these are kind of important calculations. The depth definitely should be pretty accurate based on your soils. And as I said, for those who hate math and do not want to think about drainage area or any of that stuff, you just do what you can. A rain garden typically is about the size of a parking space. So rain gardens really can't do any harm. If they're too small, it's not a big deal. If they're too big, it shouldn't be too big of a deal either. So a rain garden too big or too small is better than no rain garden at all. So that's good for people who hate math. Okay, so now we are going to get to the elements of a rain garden. We think there are 4 elements in a rain garden: the basin, the water conveyance, how you get your water to your rain garden, the berm, which holds that water in, and then your emergency overflow. And we'll talk about each of these in a little more detail. Okay, so let's start with the basin. This is essentially the bathtub where your water infiltrates. It's a flat bottom, and so this is where you hold your water, and this is where you plant. So this thick black line, that's the bottom of your rain garden, and as you can see, it's depressed, as I mentioned, whether you're going to do 3 to 6 inches depending on your soil. Your ponding level will be either 3 to 6 inches. So that, that original grade to where you dig it, that's your ponding depth. Okay, so conveyance. So this is how you direct your water to your rain garden. And for those with a flat rain garden, you might have to do a little more digging to get that water over there. So for instance, here's a swale. You may have a natural swale where your water already is traveling to the space your rain garden's going, or you might want to dig a swale to let it go. You can either plant grass, it could be a grassy swale, you could do rocks. There's lots of options for a swale to just let that overland flow get to your rain garden. Another option, if you want to, make it really, really fancy, is doing a pipe. So this person wanted to direct the water from her backyard, from the downspout from there, all the way to her front yard, so everybody could see her beautiful rain garden. So she disconnected her downspout and connected it to this long pipe. Is putting that pipe underground, and this hard PVC pipe must be pitched so the water will actually go down. So just a slight pitch, and it'll take all that water to your rain garden. So there's a couple different ways you can get the water to your rain garden. Okay, berm. Now this is holding the water in. It's also a place to deposit any excavated soil when you're digging. But basically, as you can see, the berm is downhill usually of your rain garden. So you let that water come in from the uphill portion, and then the berm holds it in. For those who want to build a wall or something, some sort of edging, if you do that, you definitely want to make sure you still have that dirt berm really packed tightly. You don't want water leaking through the edges. So you build your berm, and then you can build any fancy walls, bricks, rock edging, whatever you want, but you really want that tightly packed soil berm there. And you can use your crappy soil to do this. It doesn't need to be, plantable or anything like that. You just want to make sure it's waterproof. So there's the berm in this one. And a berm should be about 3 to 6 inches tall and 6 to 12 inches wide, just depending on the size of your rain garden. Okay, and so the outlet, you want a place to direct any excess water. You want to direct it to a safe place. You don't want to, how bathtubs have those little drains. They allow any excess water to be taken to a safe place as opposed to just overflowing everywhere. Our rain gardens are designed to treat a half-inch rain event. So when we have those really heavy rain events, like an inch, you want somewhere to send that water. You don't want to send it to your neighbor's house. You don't want to send it right on your sidewalk where it could freeze, turn to ice. So you want to pick a safe place to send it. So here's a couple options or examples of an outlet. This one does have a wall all the way around. So whoever asked that brick question, you could have it all the way around. They have their inlet right here to let the water in, which is a little depressed, and then an outlet to let the water out if it becomes too much. And then here, you could just do a dip in your berm. They got a little fancy, put some rocks there, but maybe to prevent some erosion. So there's lots of options for an outlet as long as you're directing it to a safe place. Okay, does anybody have any questions before I get into digging? Digging can be a little complicated, but it's not so bad.
Sure, we did just get one question. Can I get stormwater credits from the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District for building a rain garden?
You definitely can, and we have a whole module of this in the Master Rain Gardener course, which I'll tell you about later. CRWP can also walk you through that application process and help you get those credits. But yes, the rain garden is definitely an approved method for a stormwater fee credit from the sewer district, if you're in their service area, of course. So let us know if you need help with that. Okay, so digging. Now digging can be tough, but we give you some methods to make it a little bit easier on your back. So it's not just digging a hole. This diagram is a little exaggerated, a very steeply sloped area. A lot of people won't have this, but we recommend the cut and fill method because you want to get that flat basin. So you start digging on one side and you deposit the soil on the other side. So you can kind of like save yourself a little bit of trouble. So you want to achieve that balance of cut and fill. If you just have a flat area, you're just going to dig down and make it flat. You're just going to dig down a little bit. So you don't have to do this cut and fill necessarily. And then as I mentioned, keeping it flat is important. You don't want water pitching to one end or the other, you know, with some plants getting more water than others. So keeping it flat is really important. You can do this using a line level, like in this picture, or you can just use a 2x4 in a regular level or a big board in a regular level, just to make it flat. So there's lots of options to make it as flat as you can. Don't stress yourself out too much about it, but being flat is good. Okay, so how deep? Now it depends on the space you have and the soils you have. So it's either 3 to 6 inches. So crappy soils, slow draining soils, 3 inches. If you have those nice sandy, well draining soils, you can get up to 6 inches. So basically you want to dig down either that 3 to 6 inch depth to give you that ponding depth. And that depth starts at the bottom of either your pipe or whatever inlet. So if you're just doing overland flow, it'll be right the original grade of that of your yard, and then you dig down either 3 to 6 inches. Okay. So basically what I just said, when you start digging that 3 to 6 inches, that top stuff is going to be your nice topsoil. So you probably want to keep that topsoil because we're going to use it later. So get a tarp, dig that 3 to 6 inches, pop it on the tarp, and save it, okay? Because it could have like a lot of good nutrients in that you'll want to use. Okay, as I mentioned, oh, that's the pipe, okay, yeah. All right, now you did that, but there's a little more digging that's involved. So after you have your ponding depth, your 3 to 6 inches, you're gonna dig another 6 inches deeper, because that 6 inches, we're gonna amend that soil, because typically you probably don't have great, you know, nutrient-rich soil in that lower part. It'll most likely be a lighter shade than that nice nutrient-rich topsoil. So this you don't want to use to plant your plants. Take that and you can construct a berm out of that. So take that and make your berm because you can reuse this type of soil. Okay, so at this point, you are probably down either, let's see, 3 plus 6 is 9, or 9 to 12 inches deep. Okay, and you have your topsoil on one tarp, you have your other crappier soil on another tarp ready to make your berm, or you already made your berm. And then you are going to fill it back up to get to your ponding depth. So you're going to take that nice topsoil and you're going to mix it with some compost. We like to recommend about 2-inch layer of compost, and then you want to mix that topsoil and compost all together and fill it back up to 6 inches so you're back at your desired ponding depth. Compost is important. And then you want to tamp it down, tamp it down, make it compacted, and then make sure again that your basin is completely flat as you can get it. And then you will have your rain garden ponding depth. And at this point, you can either apply your mulch. We recommend 2 to 3 inches of hardwood double shredded mulch. So you either apply your mulch first, or if you prefer, you can plant and then add your mulch. I learned a cool little trick in the last couple of years, trick. If you plant before adding your mulch, you can take that pot that your plant or plug comes in, especially if it's really small plant, you don't want to, you know, suffocate it with mulch. You can flip that pot over the plant and then spread your mulch all over, and then you remove all the pots, and then it's perfect. So that's a cool little trick that I thought was very helpful when installing rain gardens. Okay, so you're thinking digging sounds hard. I don't want to dig that much. How can you minimize digging? Well, there's several ways. You can use no pipe. As I mentioned, you saw those pictures of the woman using a pipe digging underground, very, very fancy, but you can just use over the land flow. You can capture your water through a swale. It might just already be headed there, so you might not even have to dig that portion for your rain garden. If you do use a pipe, you could use a pop-up at the end of the pipe. This allows your inlet to be a little bit higher, so you don't have to dig as deep for your ponding depth, so that's an option. Or you could just add a berm. If you're already downhill of the house or whatever impervious surface you're using for your drainage area, you could just add a berm and minimize the digging involved. Adding native plants with these deep roots, which we'll talk about in a minute, is going to really improve your infiltration and that water capture, even if you don't do a perfectly installed rain garden. And then do you already have a wet area near your house, just like ponding area? You could just plant. You could just plant these native plants and it'll still help. Question, Kevin?
Good question. How do you prevent mulch from getting messy once the rain garden starts to fill with water?
Well, the double hardwood double shredded mulch is really the one we recommend because it doesn't get washed away in these rain events. It really stays there. So typically it doesn't get too messy after those rain events. We do recommend after a while re-adding mulch after a few years because it will just start to decompose and maybe a little bit float away. Adding a little bit mulch every year if needed, just to keep, because the mulch really holds in that moisture. But it shouldn't get too messy. It should be not so bad.
We did just get one more question about the previous slide. It said a pop-up and someone asking what that is at the end of a pipe.
So I don't have a picture of a pop-up with me. We do go into a little more detail in our Master Rain Gardener class, but basically it's a pipe that kind of goes like this and then has this like little pop-up flap. So when the water comes through, it pops up like literally, and then your water comes out of it. So as you can see, instead of here, your inlet would be a little bit higher with that pop-up. Pop-ups require a little bit of maintenance because sometimes during heavy rain events, they can just pop off. So you want to make sure you put it back on. And you also want to make sure it doesn't get clogged with like leaf and debris. So you just want to check that pop-up once in a while. Whoever has that question, if you want a picture of it or something, I'd be happy to share that with you via email, or Kevin can let me know. So if you have more questions, but hopefully that gives you an idea of what a pop-up is. Okay, so now you have your rain garden dug and you are ready to plant. So there's some considerations you want to keep in the back of your mind when planning your rain garden. You want to think about how it looks to the street. If you're having it in your front yard, you want to make sure that they can see all the plants. So you typically maybe like shorter in the front and going to bigger in the middle or in the back, depending on if you're going to be viewing it from your window in your house. You also want to think about how your neighborhood, like their aesthetic. Maybe you live in a neighborhood where they like everything very, very neat and tidy and don't want something overgrown. So you want to choose plants and also arrange them in ways that, make your neighbors like your rain garden, make it look like it's supposed to be there. Edging is always really nice too. That makes it like it's purposeful, it's supposed to be here. So that's a good thing to think about. You can think about form and textures of plants. If you like, you can see how there's different textures in this picture. Also color schemes, you could do a monochromatic color scheme. I'm sure a lot of you are probably gardeners, so you're like, I know how to design my rain garden. Or you could do like contrasting colors, like blues and yellows look really well together. So just thinking about all that before you start purchasing your plants is a good idea. And then of course, height and spread. You don't want to overfill your rain garden. It'll do best if you leave some space to let those plants grow. Everybody really wants, well, not everybody, but a lot of people want to just overfill their rain garden right away to get that immediate gratification of a full rain garden. It's good to really think about how these plants are going to spread. So when it does fully establish, it's going to look really beautiful. So think about that. And then also seasonality. It would be nice to have blooms, season round. So you want those early spring bloomers, summer bloomers, late summer bloomers, even some fall bloomers. So think about that when choosing your plants. You always have like a flower blooming. You always have some color in your rain garden. It's a nice thing to think about. And even in winter, you can think about how your rain garden is going to look in winter too. Maybe some red twig dogwood. They have those beautiful red twigs in the winter. So think about how your rain garden is going to look all year round. Okay, so for the planning purposes, this is a drawing from our Master Rain Gardener class that just ended last week. This is their base plan. They're showing where their water's coming from their house. They're using 2 downspouts to get downspout extensions to get to their rain garden right here. And they have a French drain right here. So they're overflowing into their French drain. So we usually ask people to make a base plan to just think about where their rain garden is going to go, where you're getting your water, where the overflow is going to go, and all that. So this is a nice image of that. Very well done.
Good question. How do you know which plants are aggressive and should not be used in a rain garden?
Well, that's a good question. Aggressive there are aggressive plants that can be used in a rain garden, like Canada anemone. And so it just depends on your style at that point and what you want to look like. If you don't like aggressive spreaders, don't plant that. But if you are like a lazy gardener and look, I just want my rain garden to fill up, then you might want to plant that. So what we really just want to stay away from completely are invasive plants. So if it's or just even not native, you can do not native, it's okay as long as they're not invasive. We really prefer native plants to Northeast Ohio, or really, you know, the Northeastern United States. But stay away from invasive plants. But aggressive and invasive are two different things. So if you're thinking aggressive but it's native and, you know, likes wet spot, likes to be wet year round but can handle some drought, that's okay. If it's invasive and not native to the area, I would say don't plant that at all. And as I mentioned, we do have lists of, you can, like, Cuyahoga Soil and Water Conservation District has a great resource for, you know, native plants that work well in a rain garden. Our class has one as well, where you can filter out by different things. So there's lots of resources to find those plants that will work well. So zoomed in a little bit, this is a different Master Rain Gardener student, but this is her planting plan. And basically now she has listed what plants she's going to have and where she's going to put them within her rain garden. So kind of zooming in, figuring out what looks good. And another good thing that she did was clustering her plants. We like to recommend clustering your plants because not only does it really look nice massed together in different sections, but also it will really be helpful when you're maintaining your rain garden and weeding it the next year. So you'll know what's there. If you have a ton of one thing in an area, you'll be like, okay, I meant to plant that, do not pull it. So it's helpful for that purpose as well. And as I was just talking about, why native plants? Well, we love native plants. As you can see from this diagram, these prairie native plants are, you know, the majority of what we recommend in a rain garden have these amazingly long, deep roots, sometimes up to, like, I can't even see that, 25 feet deep. And so you can just imagine how those deep roots are breaking up the soil and really improving your soil's infiltration. Now compare those roots to the turf grass all the way on the left, which I'm not even sure you can see at this point because it's so tiny and pathetic and almost impervious. So that's why we recommend native plants for rain gardens. It really helps with that infiltration. Also, native plants require less maintenance. They are adapted to this area. They can handle our wet springs, our droughty summers, and our cold winters. They're meant to be here, so they don't require a ton of maintenance. And then our local wildlife really relies on these native plants for their habitat and for food. So native plants are the way to go. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of plants that you can use in a rain garden. There's plenty more. Most of these will be on that handout that Kevin mentioned at the beginning, but some of them are not. But I tried to keep them similar to the handout. That handout is from, I think, Washtenaw County, top 20 plants used in a rain garden. But as I mentioned, there's a ton of plants you can choose from, so don't fear. So we have blue flag iris here. This is good for sun and shade. All three of these plants will do well if you have sunny or shady area. Blue flag iris is one of the toughest plants for a wet spots in your rain garden. So this is like one of the most popular plants in rain gardens, I have to say. So fox sedge, they're also good. Part sun, shade. They do well in the wettest part of your rain garden, the wettest bottom. And they're a nice filler plant with a lot of texture and that tough grass-like plant. So that's a good one too. And then we have great blue lobelia. This is a cousin of the cardinal flower. They also do well in sun or shade. And it doesn't get too terribly tall either, maybe about 18 inches. It could get taller if it's really happy. But these are some good plants. Now for shade, I don't believe all these are on your handout. And that's because it's not typical to do shade rain gardens. It's definitely possible, but a lot of people, you know, do sunny or part sun rain gardens. But these will do well in deep shade. Wild ginger, definitely do not plant this if you have a sunny area. It'll just get fried to a crisp. But this is a nice, beautiful, like ground cover like plant that will do well. Ostrich fern is also a great shade plant. This grows in forests and wet spots. It even has edible fiddleheads in the springtime, so that's a nice one to do. And then we have wild hyacinth. This it can go either full sun to part shade. This one's everywhere but deep shade. And this is growing naturally around rivers by the floodplain. So as you can imagine, it likes wet areas, so it do really well in a rain garden. And then part shade tolerant plants, we have nodding wild onion. It does well in full sun all the way to shade. It's good for the berm because it likes it a little bit drier. So you can plant on your berm if you're picking a more drying loving plant, as long as you don't have that like really crappy clay soil. But you can plant on your berm. And these look really good massed together. Canada anemone, this is one that I talked about earlier. This is a really aggressive plant. So if you're a lazy gardener, go for it. It'll fill up your garden quickly, but if, it'll trample over all of your other plants. So if you're putting it next to a not so aggressive plant, I'd be careful because Canada anemone could just take over. And this is a short plant, just about like 1.5 feet tall, so it's not too bad. All right, this might be something you want to interplant, maybe for something in midsummer. And then, as I mentioned, thinking about winter, red osier dogwood. This is a beautiful shrub that you can plant in your rain garden. And then after all the leaves fall off in the winter, it should have these really bright red, beautiful stems. And it helps if you kind of prune them once in a while to keep those the young stems have the most brightest red color. But this is a good winter interest plant you should consider. And considering where we live, thinking about winter is a good idea because our winters can tend to be long. Okay, and if you're lucky and you have a very sunny area that you're planting your rain garden, you have a lot of options for beautiful flowers. So some options for you would be switchgrass. This is also a really tough plant for wet areas. Swamp rose mallow, they have these huge, beautiful pink, or depending on what cultivar you get, flowers, and those are really good. Swamp rose mallow also does well with some salt exposure. So if you're planting near a street or someplace that gets salted during the winter, this can kind of handle that salt exposure. And then New England aster, this is a fall bloomer, and it does well in sun or part sun. And this straight species can be an aggressive spreader and can be kind of tall, 3 to 6 feet tall, with a 2 to 3 foot spread. But there's also cultivars like Purple Dome, which is shorter and more of a clumper. So the pollinators love these flowers. So the pollen and nectar can be short supply in the fall. So this is a really great plant to plant if you want to attract those pollinators. Okay, so those are some examples of plants you could plant in your rain garden. As I mentioned, there's plenty more. We just want to talk about the best times to plant. Spring and fall are the best times to plant. You can plant in summer, but spring is a really good time to plant because you have the ground is easier to dig, and all that rain you're getting is really helping those plants to establish. Fall is an even better time to plant because perennials really do well when they can focus on their roots all winter long, and not on their blooms like they would in spring. So both of those times are really good to plant. If you have to plant in summer, that's fine. Just make sure you keep watering your plants. You don't want them to dry out as they get established. So anytime the ground's not frozen, you can plant though. So for maintenance, there's really not a ton of maintenance. When you first plant a rain garden, we like to say to water it to get those plants established, especially in the first 2 years and during any droughts. But really, once your rain garden gets going, shouldn't have to water it too much. You want to weed regularly to keep those pesky unwanted plants out of there and avoid them going to seed. They mentioned cluster planting, so it's easier to weed. And then add or replace dying or dead vegetation. Sometimes you'll plant something, it doesn't do well, so maybe try a different plant. Or add more if you find your garden's not filling in as much. And then before you ask your question, Kevin, just want to say, adding some mulch annually is good. That really keeps the moisture in and is really important for rain gardens. You just don't want to over mulch, so make sure it's not over 3 inches depth of your mulch.
Okay, question. Should rain garden plants be annual or perennials?
Well, typically we like to recommend perennials. Most of the plants that we recommend are native, so they are perennials. You could put some annuals in there. They just won't really do much. They will add some beauty, but they don't really have those deep roots. They won't have time to grow those deep roots. So I wouldn't say no to annuals, but I would maybe just have them more of like a decoration. They won't be as functional. So I definitely think perennials and shrubs are the way to go for rain gardens to make it as functional as it can be. But if you want some color, add some annuals in there. Just don't make it a full annual garden. That won't really work.
Next question. The water on my road pools up to my yard. Can you make a rain garden to be placed close to the road?
Yes, you can, definitely. So you just want to think about if your road's getting salted a lot, you want to think about salt tolerant plants. I don't think any plant is completely tolerant to salt, but there are some that do better by salt. And then if you're doing it on a tree lawn or something like that near where people drive, You definitely want to check your community codes to make sure it's okay. Also, you probably want to keep those plants about 18 inches high so you're not obstructing the view of drivers. So there's just some extra considerations to think about depending on where it is in relation to the road. I'd have to see the situation to give like perfect advice, but I think if you think about those things, yeah, it's totally doable.
Okay, one more question. Can you repeat the resource you mentioned for native plants, the Soil and Water Conservation District?
Yeah, basically, if you just Google rain garden plants Northeast Ohio, I think you should get a ton of options. But if you go to Cuyahoga Soil and Water Conservation District's website and Google rain garden plants, you probably will even get our master rain gardener plant list that's filterable. We have hundreds of plants on there, and you can filter them by color, bloom time, height, whether they do well in sun, whether they do well in shade. So that if you can find that one, if you want, maybe Kevin could email the link of that to everyone on their site, but that's the one that we share with our master rain gardener students and is probably the most helpful one you could get. So I'll see if Kevin can share it, but if not, definitely just check their site, Google rain garden plants, and it should pop up. Okay, so for planting, thinking about winter, we like to recommend leaving your standing dead at least through Mother's Day because, you know, some insects overwinter either in like the hollow stems, and you know, it's best to just wait because also like some seeds, like for instance purple coneflower, have seeds over the winter and birds can eat these over the winter. So you want to keep that standing dead to support the habitat of these local birds, butterflies, and insects. And also there's beauty in a winter garden. As you can see from that bottom left picture, all that standing dead capturing the snow, it gives it some structure, and it's not just completely wiped out with perennials. So thinking about adding some shrubs to your rain garden to create that winter interest is a good idea. Okay, so I'm just going to answer some frequently asked questions. Is a rain garden a pond? No, definitely not. Rain gardens are flat, so they're not bowl-shaped like a pond would be. And also, they should be draining within 48 hours. If they're not, it was done wrong. So definitely not a pond. And they won't attract mosquitoes because mosquitoes need about 7 to 12 days to lay and hatch eggs. So you should not have that problem if you installed your rain garden correctly. And no, you do not need to fertilize your rain garden because native plants do not need any special attention. They are meant to be there where you plant them, like in our area. And stormwater carries a lot of nutrients anyway, and rain gardens are already like fertilized regularly from that stormwater. So really, you don't need to fertilize at all. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Northeast Ohio Master Rain Gardener Program. If any of you are super interested in rain gardens after this talk and want to learn more, as I mentioned, this is a 5-week course, and we brought this to Northeast Ohio in 2019, and our goal is to train residents and professional landscapers to have the confidence they need to design, install, and maintain residential rain gardens. So as I mentioned, it's a 5-week course. Basically, I shoved this 5-week course into an hour long for everyone, for you. All the courses, we have plants of the day, go into more detail about plants, have a lot more examples. We have stories of rain garden for people who've installed a rain garden and how they did it. So there's a ton of content, which is really helpful. And we offer this course both in person and online. Of course, COVID depending, we're hoping to have our in-person course later this summer, late summer. Fingers crossed we can do that. If not, we'll just switch to online. It's okay. We offer a residential and a professional certification. So if there's any professionals out there who want to install rain gardens in their client's yard, we have a special track for them as well. We also have a Facebook page, which you're welcome to join even if you're not a master rain gardener. You can post questions there. And as the program expands, we get more and more people on there sharing their feedback and helping people install their rain garden. So this is a really great resource. And there's a ton of there's master gardeners on there. We have, of course, all the master rain gardener instructors are on there. So this is a really wonderful source if you have any questions about rain gardens. And so in our program, our whole goal is to have somebody build a program. So the steps are basically finding your location, determining your size, doing your plan, your base plan, as I mentioned, and your planting plan, and you present that to the class, and then you install your rain garden. And after that, you're super proud, and we love seeing it. So we come out and take pictures of your rain garden. We bring you a wonderful sign to put in your yard and a t-shirt. Yeah, and we love sharing. The sign is awesome because we love sharing it with neighbors. We want to promote the Master Rain Gardener program to others, or just rain gardens in general. So we give you a shirt and a sign as a part of the program. And then, yeah, we really love for you to put out your sign. So these are a couple pictures of Master Rain Gardeners in Northeast Ohio who have recently installed a rain garden, and they're so happy because they, spent all this time putting it in. They're just so proud to show off their rain garden. Now, these rain gardens look great, but if you put a sign in your rain garden and you start to let it go and it gets weedy, just remove the sign. You don't have to necessarily weed it if you don't want to, but we want rain gardens to have a good name. We don't want to give them a bad name. So once you have a chance to weed that rain garden and make it look nice again, pop that sign right back in there. Hopefully your neighbors will ask you questions and you can teach them about rain gardens. Question, Kevin?
Question. Are master rain gardeners or anyone available to assist with planning and placement of a rain garden?
Yeah, some might be willing to help with that for sure. If you join the Facebook page and you just post your pictures, there's a lot of alumni who are super passionate about it. So even if you're not in the Master Rain Gardener program, I think that would be a great resource to jump on that Facebook page and say, I want to put my rain garden here. Any thoughts? And some instructors might chime in depending on how busy we are. And then, yeah, we have a lot of alumni. I think we're over 200 people on that Facebook page, and it's only going to increase as we do more classes. So I don't see why anybody would not want to help with that. We love rain gardens. There's a lot of passionate people out there willing to help with that.
Awesome. One more question. Are there any studies on how much water has been diverted from storm drains from rain gardens?
Yes, so it really depends on the type of rain garden, and we've been perfecting our metrics calculation for them. And so as I mentioned, our rain gardens treat a half-inch storm event. And so using some, and depending on the depth and size, obviously they're treating different amounts of stormwater. So after our master rain gardeners install their rain garden, they share with us all the dimensions, and then we take all those calculations, or take all those metrics and put it into this complicated calculation form and figure out how much they do. I think, I can't remember off the top of my head, a typical rain garden might prevent about 25,000 gallons of stormwater each year. But for our program right now, we have, I think, about 77 rain gardens installed since 2019, which is great. And we estimate that those 77 rain gardens are treating over 900,000 gallons of stormwater every single year. So it's significant. It's very significant. So that answer depends on the size and depth of your rain garden, though. And then also in the program, if you aren't able to build a rain garden, say you live in a condo or you rent, we offer the option to adopt a public rain garden. We have a ton of public rain gardens throughout Northeast Ohio that need some love and care. So we try to connect master rain gardeners with these public rain gardens, and you can earn your certification that way. Instead of installing a rain garden, you spend about 20 hours in a public rain garden, keeping it looking beautiful. And our volunteers tend to, even after earning their certification, just continuing to maintain it because they fall in love with it and they love seeing their work. So this is a really, even if you install a rain garden and then want to adopt a rain garden, we love that. So we're really trying to build that base of volunteers. So it's a nice component of the program. As I mentioned, if any of you are interested in joining the Master Rain Gardener program, we typically hold about 4 classes a year. We just finished our first one last week, and we have 3 more. The next one is in April, and that will be an online course. It's supposed to be in person, but of course, COVID. We're still holding out hope that we can do an in-person course this summer at Holden Arboretum, and that one will be led by me at CRWP. And then we have one final late summer online course led by Cuyahoga Soil and Water Conservation District. As I mentioned in the beginning, CRWP, Cuyahoga, and Lake County Soil and Water Conservation District work really closely together, so we all contribute to every single class. So we're all part of each class. So please feel free to sign up. If you have any questions, you can email me or Kevin. I believe this flyer is also in that handout, so you should have more information there as well. And just to wrap it up, we believe that rain gardens really help contribute to happy streams, which contribute to happy wildlife, and then happy people. So I'm so excited for all of you guys to be here. I hope you learned a lot. And if you want to become a master rain gardener, even better. But thank you for being here, and we're so excited to have brought the Master Rain Gardener program to Northeast Ohio. So thank you, everyone.
Okay. So if anyone has any last-minute questions, now would be a great time to get them in. I'll just reiterate really quickly, just so everyone knows, we're going to post the recording of this webinar onto our website. I'll send out a notification once that's up, in case anyone wants to take a look or share with anybody. I'll also include the handout on our website as well, in case you want to get that. Just in case anyone is having any trouble finding the handout, you should see it maybe on like the right side of your screen. There should be a PDF called Rain Gardens 101. It has info on the Master Rain Gardener program, some of the plants that Laura mentioned today, as well as like a general overview of what is a rain garden. So I'm not seeing any more questions, so it looks like we can go ahead and wrap this up. So Laura, thank you again for your presentation. I thought it was great. That was very useful. Ooh, we actually just did get a question. Is there a fee for the Master Rain Gardener courses?
Yes, there is a fee depending on whether you do online or in person. It's $50 for online and $75 for in person. But we do offer scholarships for those who have a lower income level or based on need. So if you are interested in a scholarship, please let me know. But yes, there is a fee that goes along with it.
Okay. So one more person asked, can you post the entire list of plants you recommended? We can go ahead and I will include that once I get the recording posted on our website, and I'll send that out with the email to notify everyone. Any more questions? Not seeing any. So, all right. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. It's about 12 o'clock. So we can get everyone out of here before 12. So thanks everyone for joining. I appreciate all the support on our Speaker Series program, and thanks again, Laura, for your presentation. And I'll see you all again very soon, hopefully. All right.
Thank you,
Take care,
everyone.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.